Okay, as this episode is being released, it's going to be November 2nd, just a few days away from yet another election day here in the good old USA. Turns out that this election cycle happens to be more important than most. It's a presidential election cycle. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Alright, presidential election cycle in a couple of days from when this episode is released. Gotta admit, I'm actually not as fired up as I thought I was gonna be. Because typically, I really enjoy the presidential election cycle. I think it's almost as entertaining as watching any sporting event. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it is. Think about it. I'm a football fan, baseball fan, hockey fan. I have a very favorite team that I like to watch. I take my time, I set up things, I get comfortable, and I enjoy each game as it happens. Sometimes the results are not what I want. Other times I'm excited and happy. Go Yankees, go Niners, go University of Texas, go New Jersey Devils, and yeah, Sixers. And I enjoy the outcome. Other times, well, those stinking Rams run up on the 49ers and beat them down. Looks like Georgia took a big bite out of Texas this week. And, well, at the moment, as I'm recording, all is well with the Yankees, and it seems like the Sixers aren't so deep into the season where anything is really that important yet. So, everything seems to be good in that sense. But politics is much the same. Most people have a favorite team, Democrats or Republicans. They root for that side as hard as they can. They support that side as best they can. And they vote for that side as often as the opportunity presents itself. Myself, I'm an independent. So I'm that guy who would be going to a football game that was invited by a friend and said, "Hey, Phil, you want to check out this game between the Steelers and the Chargers?" And I'll be like, "Sure, why not? You got the ticket, it's free, and I get to watch." I'm all in. You see, I have no vested interest in either the Steelers or the Chargers. So, to me, it's just going to be an entertaining football game. That's ultimately what politics turns out to be for me as an independent. I see the Republicans and I see the Democrats, and I just grab a bowl of popcorn and I watch. And I'm intrigued by what happens. Now, it turns out that this particular cycle, we've had a lot of intrigue, you say. A former president who was running, who was nearly assassinated 3 times that I'm counting so far as of this recording. And right now it's actually October 22nd as I'm recording it. We have a vice president who is now running for president after taking the delegates from the sitting president and becoming the candidate who was going to run. That's just juicy. A lot of fun stuff is going on. But this episode isn't about Republican, Democrat. No. Like I said, I'm an independent, and I feel that each of them has as many flaws as they have positives. And typically, I try to vote for whatever individual candidate in each particular race, Senate, mayor, governor, city council, that has the least amount of things I don't like, be it Republican or Democrat. And that's kind of how I roll. But of course, this particular election has the presidency on the line. And I'm not going to go into where I stand ultimately, because most people would find it to be completely ridiculous on both sides. Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll tell you that I have a plan to write in a candidate that may or may not be a fictional character, because I'm not too overly happy with either of the candidates who are running. And that's kind of where I stand with that. Before I go into too much more detail, it's time for me to fill in the blank. And right now, the only blank that needs to be filled in is on this question. What is the most important thing about any voting cycle? That blank can be filled in by simply going to vote. It's irrelevant who you vote for as long as you actually take that opportunity to vote. Especially for black people, there have been more than, in fact, just in general, not even just black people, white people, brown people, everybody's had to fight to get that right to vote one way or the other. So, no matter who you are, at the end of the day, it's kind of your duty to cast that ballot, because somewhere, someone had to put their life on the line in order to give you an opportunity to vote. It's just that simple. So you would be doing that group of people a disservice by not doing so. So once again, the question for the fill in the blank: what is the most important thing about the voting cycle? And the answer, that is so simple, is actually simply going out to vote. Now it is time for me to ring the bell and begin the main event. Here it comes. The thought process behind this episode is really simple. Once again, I'm going to reiterate the fact that I am an independent in politics. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. Because there's just not enough meat on either bone for me to personally take a bite out of. A lot of times I have to see just which side has enough of that I can actually dig into, and usually there is no specific rhyme or reason. It's just a fact that somebody just did one little thing more than the other. Going back to football, it's kind of like that 4th and 1 play. Well, it's more like inches. And you just needed just a little bit more to get over the hump. Just that one quick quarterback sneak to get that football across that line. To me, that's what both the Republicans and Democrats have to do on every election cycle. They need to just push a little bit more. And sometimes one side does get the first down. Other times, they do not convert. So ultimately, this episode is going to be about what the new president should do, no matter who it is. I don't care if it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. At the same time, because I think that they equally have as many weaknesses as they have strengths. And truthfully, that balance isn't something that makes me feel good. I would prefer to be more of a 60-40 guy, which is what I usually end up doing. Whereas this time it's more 50-50 as far as weaknesses and strengths for both candidates. So I toss all that to the side, and I'm going to really do my write-in ballot. But for whichever one of those two does win, because it's going to be one of them, I think that they need to do certain things in order to just make the country just balanced. At this point, we're not really looking for because I think better, at least for the first 2 years of this term, is really not what we're looking at. We need to sort of level things off, because it's really like we're in a hole, and we do need to fill that hole in. That way, we can be level, and once we're level, then we can actually start to come up. But you got to get level first. And I think that we need to do that by doing some simple things. And a lot of times, again, using the football analogy, you run the ball, get 5 yards, or you throw short little screen passes, or little out patterns, get a few yards here and there, inch your way down the field. That way, when the opportunity to throw that big deep pass comes up, usually you're going to have that one-on-one coverage and be able to get that receiver open. But right now, man, they literally have 45 players on the field on the defense, and they're surrounding all of our wide receivers. So the only thing we can do is just sort of slowly run it up the middle. And I think that a good place to start is infrastructure. I know there's a lot of talk about abortion and recession possibilities if things continue the way they are, with this inflation moving the way it is, and that's all true. But the one thing that I've personally paid attention to for the last several election cycles that I've been able to vote in is that every single time you hear the president say at least once or twice, or the person who's running for president, we're going to make a concerted effort in order to rebuild the infrastructure across America, because there are nothing but bridges falling down and roads that are falling apart. Well, I think if there's a place to start, that might be it. Because you'll be able to solve a multitude of problems just by fixing the infrastructure in the country. There is an immediate impact on a couple of factors by working on infrastructure. The first thing you get is, obviously, it's going to make travel easier. If the bridges are in good shape, if the potholes are gone, if the roads are maintained, you'll then have drivers to be able to get to where they're trying to get to without the fear of having their car fall through the center of the earth because they find a pothole that is so deep that it resembles the Grand Canyon. And, of course, you have to have people who do that work all over the country, between city, county, and state highways and bridges. You would then have to employ people to do that work, which, of course, every single presidential candidate always likes to say they want to bring in jobs. Well, if you're going to fix bridges, if you're going to fix roads and maintain the infrastructure of our highways, you've got an instant you've got, seriously, it's almost like just jobs will form because you need people to do that work. And the work that those people will be getting is not going to be minimum wage work. It's going to, for a lot of times, for those jobs, it'll be prevailing wage, which means they'll be making very high salaries for an extended period of time in order to fix these roads, fix these bridges, which is going to be doing everybody a favor, because now you're giving these individuals work at a very high salary and for a considerable amount of time. But what you then need to do is maintain the infrastructure. It's one thing to say, oh, we're going to fix this bridge. Done. But then you say, thank you for your service, for helping us fix that bridge. Now go find another project for you to do. Now that guy's out of work. What if you take a handful of those people and you simply say, okay, your job is to maintain this bridge that we have just fixed. I don't know if I'm breaking new ground here, but it just seems, I don't know, too much like right. Same thing with the roads. You hire all these extra people to make sure the road is fixed. And then, when the road is fixed, it's like, thanks for coming. Maybe you need to retain some of those people, even if it's not at that higher rate that you used in order to get the initial infrastructure completed. But eventually, anything that we fix is going to break down. So you're going to need the people to maintain the roads. My lord, potholes in the winter, in a bad winter, they're insane. In fact, I just was at a store today that has um, a bunch of a paving crew out. Now, granted, that store is a publicly owned place and they maintain it at their own cost. But it seems like since I've been living here 4 years in this area, there have been 2 years that these people have been back there to repave this area of this store. They keep that rotation moving because they keep that parking lot paved perfectly. I mean, it's just all the time they're working on it. Make sure that they don't ever run into a situation where it gets out of control. And that's the best thing to do. You then are able to maintain a nice high level of consistency, and the parking lot looks wonderful. The same thing can be done with the streets, the major highways, the throughways. You fix them, and then you keep some of those extra people that you had in order to fix it, so that you have extra bodies to make sure you can maintain that area. Meaning you've created a permanent set of jobs. I don't know. It just seems like it would make sense if you could make that sort of infrastructure plan, but that's just what I think. It's just a simple thing. I do want to touch on the southern border because it also lends itself to the infrastructure situation. There have been talks about building a wall. And then there are people who are like, oh, it's a stupid idea. It's going to cost too much. Yeah. Fine. It's going to be expensive. But if you take that idea and make that idea something that makes sense, you can solve a few problems and you can create more jobs. It's a very simple thing if you wrap your mind around it. Hear me out. Hear me out. Let's say we do build that wall throughout the southern border. You're going to have 3 possible opportunities to create jobs when you build that wall. Many of them will be permanent if it's done properly. You've already got Border Patrol. But now, if you build this wall, you know that and the Border Patrol is, in fact, running low, and they need some more bodies out there. If you hire more Border Patrol officers to help work to protect the wall, you've now got permanent jobs because you're going to need those Border Patrol officers anyway. And now they can be used to man the wall, as well as other things along the border in order to maintain the security of that southern wall. So you've now created a multitude of great jobs just with them. Then, of course, you have to build the wall. So you need the bodies to build the wall, the construction workers who are going to do that. And it's not a very small project, it's a big project. And it could take an extended period of time, much like the bridge repairs, much like the street repairs. And as a result of that, You're going to employ a whole bunch of people for a time period in order to create this wall. That is an incredible thing to do. Most likely, again, you'll have the prevailing wage and they'll be making a very, very nice salary to do that. Now, the third set of jobs that you create. Just like any high rise that you build in any major city, the people put the building together, they put in the glass, they put in the plumbing, the electricity, they do all that stuff. Of course, the wall's going to need lights and it's going to need all that other stuff. Now, once you've built something like that in the city, you then need to have maintenance workers to maintain that building. The wall can't just be left to its own devices. Granted, yes, we're going to hire more Border Patrol agents to watch the wall, but the wall is going to be a tangible thing. After a while, it's going to need repairs. It's going to need regular maintenance. And with the length of this thing, because just the idea of the size of the southern border, we're not talking about the parking lot of a Chick-fil-A. We're talking about a pretty significant chunk of area. You're going to need people in various spots who are able to repair whatever the wall may need. Say, like I said, for lights, you need people to do that. If a bulb goes out, you're going to have somebody change the bulb. If there's a hole in the wall, you're going to have people who can fix that. You're going to have regular maintenance. And since it is a high area where people may be trying to sneak across and it could be dangerous, they may do severe damage to a wall at certain times, and you may need those people to be available to begin those repairs on a moment's notice. So it could be almost like a 24-hour deal in order to maintain the wall. So you could be looking at some people who could have jobs that could give them security for a long, 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 long time. Because, once again, the three groups of jobs that you would create would be more Border Patrol officers, the people who actually build the wall physically, and you would have to maintain the wall. So you're going to have maintenance workers in order to maintain the wall. So you're talking right there, three groups of people, more jobs you've made. So just in what I've talked alone, you have people building bridges, building the wall, building roads. Then you have people maintaining the bridges, maintaining the wall, maintaining the roads. Then you have border security. I've just created a situation where you have 7 entities that can get work for an extended period of time. 7. And that could be thousands of people at very good salaries. I think that would be something that I would hope that whoever wins the presidency would consider. That would cover a lot of ground, I think. Now we have, of course, everybody's favorite. Everybody loves inflation. Everybody does. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Prices going up. But then you say, why? And of course, people complain about trade embargoes because that then has the products coming from overseas at a higher price. And, well, just recently we actually had a crazy thing where the industry would almost shut down everything because the people who were going to actually get the stuff off the docks stopped working. That was a problem. But now, of course, that meant that you couldn't, if they had stayed out for an extended period of time, now the supply begins to dry up and the demand begins to rise, and then prices get even worse. But they're handling that, hopefully. And they can maintain that situation and crush it quickly so that we don't have to worry about that kind of nightmare on top of everything else. But in truth, it's difficult to get that balance right, because if we were to make more stuff here, we'd still have to ship it, we'd still have to stock it, and we'd still have to sell it. It's one of those situations where if we could get that to happen, we would be in a lot better shape, because that would, of course, open up more jobs. It would saturate the market with more things, and people would have a little bit more convenient way in order to get products. But of course, that's the biggest part with merchandise of all types. To simply say that a lot of times the lock is separate from the key happens more often than not. Just to explain what I'm saying, it's real difficult to open up a lock if you don't have the key, correct? Correct. Some products are made in pieces and then assembled in another place. Just a simple saying. They don't have all the parts in one spot and they can't put it all together. So, some car company, for example, none in particular, they have every piece. The engines are just throwing out strange nut places just to make my point. Tires come from Sacramento, let's say. The engine blocks are made in Detroit. Muscle is. The brakes are manufactured in Canada. Alberta, let's just say. But all those parts have to go to the facility in Kentucky so they can make the Corvette. Yeah, I just had to go there. Bowling Green. I love Corvettes, and that's where they make them. Bowling Green, Kentucky. Love it. But of course, now you need all those parts to come from all different places, and then they can assemble the Corvette. It's like that for a lot of stuff. Even cereal, which is something that's always close to my heart. Gotta grow the wheat somewhere. Gotta get the sugar cane from somewhere. Gotta get the artificial coloring from somewhere. And then they ship it all to the same place. And the way that it works, I mean, these factories that build these individual things, and then they can combine them to make the finished product, they all win. But the problem is, sometimes they're in different places, and if you can't get a certain ingredient because it's out of the country, let's say, and there's a tax on an embargo for that particular ingredient, now that ingredient's price is going to be higher. And of course, when the company pays that price to get that ingredient, they then need to raise the price of the box of cereal in order to actually make a profit, which is the whole idea of business to begin with. Make a profit. And of course, you have the workers who are working in those plants in each of these individual places. Now, they're going to want regular raises after a point in time, but because they have to pay for certain ingredients that cost more than they used to, they're going to be a little slow to give the employees more money. And it's just a vicious cycle. Employees get less money, the product becomes more. But now, after a while, you're going to need to make your employees happy, and you're going to have to raise their salary, which is going to eventually make the product become more as well. just a miserable nightmare that it comes into. There's not much you can do about it, except you have to consider what is being done, and people need to be realistic about certain products and certain jobs. Certain things need to be at a certain level and certain prices. It just got to be that way. You've got to have, because there's levels to this thing. There absolutely are. Certain skills require more pay. Say, I'm not going to pay somebody who's an underwater welder the same as I would pay a shoe shiner. Just a much different and more dangerous skill set. Not to get on the soapbox of wages lowering the cost of it's just horrible, because the cost of living goes up because of the prices of the product raising, and then the prices of the employees. They need more money, and it's just a mess. It really is. It's a hurt piece. It really, really is. I think that there are certain things that need to stay in certain spots. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to football. They have devalued the running back for some reason in the NFL for the last 10, 15 years, where a wide receiver will make right now $30 million. Great job, Brandon Ayuk. You did exactly what you should have done, and I'm not going to be mad at you, because your ACL and MCL tear is going to have you out for the rest of the season. And had you not signed that contract, well, you wouldn't be making that $120 million. But you did the right thing. Running backs have a more brutal job. They get banged up on every play, and yet tops for running back is maybe $15 million. Now I'm using ridiculous numbers, but to say the value of certain positions makes a difference with how much they make, as it should in all industries, depending on how valuable you are to your company and what your abilities are and level should determine what you make. I'm not going to go any further into that than what I've just said. Read into it what you will. I do believe that something that the president should do is somehow regulate the amount that both manufacturers can charge for items in order to combine to make certain products, and as far as pay for the employees goes, that's up to the people who run the company. Bottom line. Because, like anything, it's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. Bottom line. If somebody decided that they wanted to pay, I don't know, let me think of it. I'm going to use New Jersey because it's such a beautiful thing. And I'm going to talk about this at another time. The person who pumps your gas, because in New Jersey, they have dedicated people to do that. The rest of the country really needs to catch up on that, just saying. But somebody can own a gas station and say, you know what? I think that you should make $35 an hour to pump that gas. And guess what? They're going to pay that $35 to that employee, and that's how it's going to be. He comes to work on time all the time. He never overpumps. He never underpumps. He's always nice to everybody. That's the way it is. Now, another guy at another gas station would be like, well, I don't think it's worth $35, and I'm going to pay my guy $12. It is what it is. Now, if that guy who's making $12 feels that he's not getting the money that he deserves, I think the only option for him is to go to work at the gas station that pays $35, as long as there's an opportunity. Keep your ear to the ground, wait, find out if they're hiring. You've got experience, you'll get that $35. Go. I think that there should be certain caps to certain things, but I think that, again, I'm going to go ahead and say that minimum wage maybe needs to go away completely. And I think that it should be determined upon the individual owners of private companies to decide what a position is worth. Period. They do it all the time in both city, county, state, and federal. They assign an amount of money to a position, and then they assign steps where that person can elevate as they grow until they get to a point where they feel that that's the most money that that position should make. So I don't understand why it should be any different in the private sector either. Should be a choice for the person who has started the business. Maybe that's something that the president should look into. Just thinking about out loud. What else am I looking at? Yeah, I'm going to go into taxes a little bit too, because I think that everybody hates taxes. In fact, that's the number one reason why this country essentially was established, because it just got tired of paying those stupid taxes on that tea. It was over the top. The King of England, he can keep his tea. That's why they threw it in the river, right? That's why they threw it because they said no. That's why I had that tea party in Boston. I said, no, we're not buying that. Not at all. So I'm gonna make it real simple, and I think it can't be any more complex than this as far as taxes go. People say billionaires should pay their fair share. Millionaires should pay their fair share. Middle class is getting hammered by taxes. The lower class is getting hammered by taxes. I've heard plenty of people talking that they're thinking about gig workers who get tips. Either of the presidential candidates should, in fact, do this. I think it'd be a good idea if they were able to not tax tips or overtime like they were talking about. That's cool. I mean, it is cool because, granted, if you're willing to go in and do that extra mile and work a little bit harder because you have something you're trying to get, you're working all that overtime because you're trying to get a vacation, and so you could enjoy a couple weeks with your family in some nice resort somewhere, or let's say you're trying to catch up on a bill, or let's say you're trying to put your kid through school and you need that extra money. Hey, why not let that be tax free? I think that's the best way to do it. Tax free on tips and overtime. That's cool. But as far as general taxes go, I think that we shouldn't penalize somebody for making a tremendous amount of money. Sorry. If I were to come up with an idea and I were to implement that idea and I was to monetize that idea and I made millions, if not billions of dollars, I would not want somebody to begrudge me of that. I came up with the idea, I made it all work out, and I made all this money because of it. I think that if that person, me, let's say I had that idea and I started employing people at whatever wage I feel is necessary for whatever I need them to do, I wouldn't begrudge them for having the money that I'm going to pay them. I'm going to say, this is what I think it's worth. You can do this job, and we'll all make money together. Now, as far as the taxing goes, why should I be penalized tax-wise because I had a good idea? Or even if it's my grandfather's good idea and he passed away and gave me X, Y, and Z money. Why should I be penalized for that? I don't know. I don't get it. I think that in general, taxes should be simple. Admittedly, some people say some of those billionaires and millionaires get away with not paying enough taxes. Well, if you just came up with a flat tax, everybody's talked about it from time to time, everybody pays 10%. Period. End of story. You get your check, 10% is taken out. Over, done. Everybody pays 10%. You may have a job where you make $500 a week, 10%. Somebody makes $1 million, 10%. A very wise man said this once, and I love that thought process that he had. And he was talking about tithing to the church, which is 10%. He said very, very simply, if you can't make it on 90% of what you get, how are you supposed to make it on 100%? It's not probably going to work out so well. So, if you can't make it on that 10% of that $500, you got a problem. If you can't make it on that 10% of $1 million, you got a really big problem, right? So, you just, whatever number it is, it doesn't even have to be 10%. It can be 50%, whatever. As long as everybody's paying the same exact numbers, that way nobody can complain. That's the way I feel about that. Now, if the next presidential candidate can implement just those couple things that I've talked about, I think we'd be in pretty good shape. I really do. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell and the main event. Now that that's over with, I'm going to move on to something more fun. Not that I didn't have fun talking about politics, because I have to admit, I love talking about politics. But I'm going to talk about more football, because now I don't have as many episodes lined up, and I'm going to go to you and talk to you this week about how I did in week 7 and what I expect to do for week 8. Yeah, I'm a little behind, but that's okay. I'm getting caught up because I did all those weeks last week in order to get myself where I need to be moving forward. What I've got for you is what I did in week 7 right now. I picked the Detroit Lions to lose to the Minnesota Vikings 35-30. That didn't happen. Minnesota pulled it off. They actually lost. They were undefeated. And now the Minnesota Vikings have finally lost their first game, and it had to happen to a division opponent who is, I would say, if not the best team in the NFL right now, they've got to be up there with them. Minnesota was beaten by the Detroit Lions 31-29. Not too bad. I was off by just a little bit as far as the numbers went. Gonna be one down here that I was way off, but I'll get to that when it comes. Houston Texans versus the Packers. I said Packers, they got this. 27-24. I was pretty close. I had the Packers winning, and the Packers won 24-22. Everybody in Philadelphia's pride and joy, the Eagles. They've been a little off this year, but I think they are a little off just in general. And I picked them anyway because they're playing one of the worst 3 teams in the NFL, their own division mate, the New York Giants. And I picked them to barely win 21-20, but they opened it up a little bit more, 28-3. And I think personally, as bad as the Giants are, they probably should have beat them 42-3. Just throwing it out there. Now, the worst team in the NFL, the Carolina Panthers, playing a team that I thought is up and coming, and I'd like to see them do something since my Niners are they're not clicking. Too many people are hurt. I can pretty much write them off. Sad to say, but they may be done halfway through the regular season. Their season is probably over. However, Washington Commanders ate up the Panthers, which is what I expected. I said 35-21, but the Panthers are worse than I gave them credit for, and they lost 40-7. Just unbearably bad. But speaking of unbearable and bad, man, Patrick Mahomes, 2 interceptions. Brock Purdy, 3 interceptions. It was just insane. Missed field goal. Just a missed extra point, rather. It was just some crazy stuff going on. It was a mess for the 49ers and the Chiefs offensively. However, both of their defensive units showed up. Just so happens that the Chiefs unit showed up a little bit more. I expected it to be 28-27 because the offenses were going to be a little better than they were. However, both offenses actually they both let me down a little bit. Final score: Kansas City 28, San Francisco 18. Very much a hurt piece for me. Very, very much. But I'm still keeping my head above water. I'm doing okay. My record so far this season is 21-14, so I'm a winner at this point in time. 7 weeks through the season. We'll find out what happens next week, because I think that these games are certainly going to be a lot more difficult to call than I originally was looking for. So if I can pull off another 3-2, I'd be real happy here. But oof, we're talking some crazy close stuff. And as I'm looking at it, I'm about to change a score right now. I think that this one, I'm going to lower this one. I think the outcome's the same, but I'm going to lower it. And I'm going to heartbreakingly change this score. And you're hearing me do this live as this episode's going on. I'm changing this score because I lost a little bit of faith. It's terrible to say that as a member of the faithful, I've lost a little faith. But I think that you don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to start there where I usually end with my 49ers. This week, I'm going to start week 8, 49ers versus the Cowboys. And if you asked me this at the beginning of the season where most of the players were healthy, I had the score a certain way. And I was looking at the 49ers 42, Cowboys 28. I thought that the 49ers were going to run over them, and it was going to be easy in Santa Clara, Levi Stadium. 49ers were going to just eat up the Cowboys. But as of recent injuries and knowing what's going on, I've changed my mind. I hope that I'm wrong, but I don't expect to be. I've given this some thought over the last couple of days, and I think that the score is going to end up being 35-20, because they're going to fight as best they can. Hopefully they can get one of those players back, but it might even be lower than that, and I hope they can get 20 points, the 49ers. I expect the Cowboys to win. for the first time against the 49ers in several years. And it's because right now, Brandon Ayuk is hurt. Um, Deebo Samuel has, well, yeah, Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL and MCL. He's going to be out for the rest of the year. Christian McCaffrey has that Achilles thing going on because he got the Madden curse. So we're probably not going to see him this year at all. George Kittle, the best tight end in the NFL, injured his ankle. I expect him to probably miss this Cowboys game. Um, Jordan Mason, the backup running back for Christian McCaffrey, has a shoulder issue that he played through, and he gave his best, but he wasn't really at his top, so he's not going to be as effective as he is. Javon Hargrove tore his tricep, where I tore my bicep. If we could put it together, we would have one good arm. But he's not going to be playing. He's been out for the year. Hufanga, the great young safety, who tore his ACL last year, he came back and he got hurt again, and he's not going to be there. I'd say Deebo Samuel has pneumonia, and he was actually hospitalized the week that I'm recording this. October 22nd, he's in the hospital with pneumonia. I hope he comes back. I hope he lives with the pneumonia. So ultimately, the offense is riddled with injuries and disease. The defense, Trey Greenlaw hasn't come back from his torn Achilles yet from the Super Bowl, so he's not playing. There's just the kicker, even as bad as he was, he's been out for the last 3 weeks, and I don't expect him to be back in time to play the Cowboys. So they're probably gonna have another kicker come in because this guy missed an extra point. So it's just not looking great. Going to be a lot of rookies getting their first game action. Going to be a lot of first-year players getting out there to try to play. Oh, I forgot. Jawan Jennings, another great player for the 49ers. He just had a great game a few weeks ago. He's hurt. He's not going to be there. He's their third receiver. So the options are pretty much limited to Brock Purdy has to throw the ball, run down the field, catch it himself. That's what we're looking at right now. It's not looking good. Cowboys 35, 49ers 20. That was painful. So let me go through the rest of this. I expect the San Diego Chargers to win, but not by as much as I thought against the Saints. I lowered that score. I think the Chargers can pull it off 20-14. Seattle and Buffalo, two really good teams, unfortunately for me, because 49ers have to play them both one more time this year with Seattle, and they're going to play the Bills, I believe, after they lose to the Cowboys. And I think the Bills are going to be 27-20 in Seattle, and the only reason why it's going to be 27-20 is because it is in Seattle. Let's see. Tampa Bay versus their division mate, Atlanta. The Falcons and Bucks. At the Bucks, I still think, as good as the Falcons are, Tampa Bay has some issues, and I forgot, speaking of a team that lost both of its receivers due to injury, one guy has a bad hamstring, and he tried to play in Week 7, and he aggravated it, so he's probably not going to play in Week 8. It's Mike Evans, and then, of course, the other guy, Godwin, man, he just got himself in such a bad position where they had to put an air cast on him in order to get him off the field. He was in real bad shape, so his season could very well potentially be over. So I think that I'm going to change my original thought, because if all things considered and both of those guys were healthy, I thought Tampa Bay would have won that game against the Falcons 30-20. But without those players, I think the score could potentially be a little different, to the point where Atlanta could have some success because they have a lot of their deadly weapons, And maybe the score might look like 21-7. I think that the Bucks are going to lose that many points based on those injuries. I know there's an injury in Washington. Jalen Daniels for the Commanders, really good looking young quarterback. I use him on the Cleveland Browns when I'm playing as a secondary team. He's fun to use. He really is. And he's fun to watch with the Commanders. He's a good young player. And of course, Caleb Williams in Chicago is looking pretty good too. Better than I expected. And that division that he's in is full of teams that are really good. If they can keep pace, which is an if, but anything can happen. Almost happened for the NFC West a couple years back, where all 4 teams made it to the playoffs. They were that close because the second teams were not anywhere near as good as the 49ers division's entirety. But I think that it was one team slipped up and couldn't make it. I think it was the Cardinals had just lost one game too many, and they were out. And it was a possibility that all 4 teams, if memory serves me correct, they all could have made it to the playoffs. But that's happened a couple times. No. Specifically, that was an opportunity for all 4 teams to make it into the playoffs. And I think that the Chicago Bears, the Minnesota Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, and the Detroit Lions are that division that is good enough to potentially make it, where all 4 teams make it to the playoffs. That would be really cool. It would be really cool. The other 3 teams would be division champions. That would be so cool if that happens. And I think it very well could. And give me a couple weeks and I might decide to make that a thing. I might call that. But as for this game, I think that the Commanders are going to beat the Bears just because I like the package in Washington just a little bit better. I think Washington's going to win 24-21. And that's my picks for Week 8. And so, we get ready to move on to the final part of the show. This is the part where I tell you that if you haven't already liked and subscribed to at Phil the Lip, you should do so. That way you'll catch all the content, not just the show, but you'll also have some videos that I post from time to time. Like you'll see that the whole process that's going on with my arm. In fact, I got to do another video about that this week that I'm going to post because as I'm talking to you, I'm in my 2nd week of therapy. And man, it is rough. But I'll be posting about that as well as other things. Like you're looking at this painting that is in the background right now. It's yet another one of one by me. I call this one 8. And not just 8 for any weird reason, but it's 8 because A-T-E 8. A period, T period, E period. Because I actually painted this painting August 20 the 8th E of 2023. And that's literally the only reason why I named it 8. But of course, you can catch this one of one when the time comes. Check me out on Instagram, Philip Henderson 5102. I'm out there on X, and I always like to say for the Facebook group, join us. There's always room for one more. And it is time for the words of wisdom right before we close out today. No, it's not, because I forgot something that I never want to forget. I was just so impassioned about this football scores that I forgot to give you the spear of the week. But I'm not going to forget it because there's a very important spear for this election cycle week. That would be any of the talking heads who are out there trying to stir people up. They deserve to get speared right through your television set and through the background that they're sitting behind, because their ability to just anger people is unbelievable. So I think that those people who are the talking heads, who are just out there to just aggravate people, they are the spear of the week. And finally, I've got the words of wisdom. They kind of go hand in hand with the fill in the blanks. As this episode airs, it's going to be November 2nd, 2024, and Election Day is November 5th, 2024. So, the words of wisdom are very simple. If you're registered, go vote. Your job will allow you time to do so, and even if you don't want to do it at that point, the polls are open early and they close late. So if you work overnight or if you work in the morning, you're going to have a chance, or any time in between, you're going to have a chance to go vote. And like I said, regardless whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, just go exercise your right. Do so. And those are the words of wisdom. And on that note, I believe we're done here. My name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.